coming up on today's show. As we count down the final moments to the 2019 elections, political parties are turning on the charm to collect those last few votes. But young South Africans aren't buying it.
Those 18 to 19 have not registered in their numbers.
A poor turnout among youth.
We are deeply concerned.
I feel like there's actually no option because they're all trash.
And that's a second-degree burn.
Our team has gone from campus to town hall, and we're not afraid to ask the tough questions.
You're getting me into a very difficult conversation.
25 years into South African democracy, it feels like we're having a quarter-life crisis.
Levels of frustration are quite high.
Our special guest has been in the trenches of South African politics for years.
Mr. Malema, you've now dealt with the proverbial elephant in the room. Now we move on to the buffalo.
Lester Kiewit is in the house. Together, we'll dissect the campaign trail, decode the manifestos, and demystify the electoral process. Finally, we'll have a chat with two young changemakers about whether our electoral system itself needs some
renewal,
and see how else we can stay involved in democracy after election day.
Young people can make their voices heard.
Mzansi, let's get away.
Hello and welcome to the first ever Politically Aweh election special. I'm Zipho Majova, and joining me today is our researcher, Zaid Lagardien, and our special guest, broadcaster and journalist, Lester Kiewit. Guys, the 2019 elections campaign trail has been one of the craziest we've ever seen. All the parties have been out in full force, and it's been pretty hard to miss this.
The ANC is on a path of renewal.
Sound the call to come together.
We are the ones we have been waiting for.
They have even claimed the days of the week: ANC Sundays, EFF Red Fridays. I suppose Blue Mondays doesn't quite work, hey? And of course, being South Africa, there had to be music.
I'm waiting for a signal.
We have a packed ballot this year, with 48 parties vying for the throne, and we're seeing a lot of new players. There's the African Transformation Movement, which counts Mzwanele Manyi among its ranks. And if they get some seats in parliament, we'll hear more of this. Patricia de Lille is back in the game with her new party, and this familiar South African is feeling good.
So good, so good, so good, so good.
The Patricia de Lille I know has opposed injustice and still continue to fight corruption.
Then there's the African Security Congress, the African Covenant Party, and the Land Party, among others. The ANC launched their manifesto in Durban in early January, and look who was there.
The former president, as you can hear, the crowds on their knees screaming.
The DA wasted no time in bashing the ANC, even placing a Gupta statue in Bloemfontein at the church where the ANC was founded. But it hasn't been smooth sailing for the opposition. My money told supporters
44 out of 10 South Africans don't have a job.
And his party's former head of policy, Ngwenya, became the 45th when she resigned weeks before their manifesto launch, saying the party leadership gave her no budget.
The DA's head of policy, Ngwenya, has resigned, penning a resignation letter to DA leader Mmusi Maimane. Ngwenya alleges the party simply doesn't take policy seriously.
Maybe this is where all the money went.
Corrupted and sold out by the power-hungry.
There's that statue again.
With anger and hate.
Childish Gambinos, this is America copied again. But guys, there were also some rather uncomfortable moments. The president experienced his own service delivery for the first time.
Yeah, levels of frustration are quite high.
He was also criticized for his comments on immigration.
Everybody just arrives. We are going to bring this to an end.
The DA unveiled a billboard bearing names of victims from the Marikana and the Life Estimini tragedies. And after initially defending it,
the truth hurts.
They did a U-turn.
This was an honest mistake.
There were these comments from the main character of Gangster State, Ace Magashule. The book's Joburg launch was met with disruption.
The protesters have ripped off copies of the book and are holding up posters that say #HandsOffAce.
And things also took a nasty turn for broadcaster Karima Brown.
Last night, Mr. Julius Malema put my telephone number on blast as
the youngsters say on Twitter. And I have basically been receiving threats that involve threats of rape.
Well, so much for the World Press Freedom Day. Malema did take the tweet down, but this was why.
Twitter comes to me through email. Remove that nonsense, otherwise we're losing this.
The Freedom Front Plus took court action against Black First, Land First for this stance in their membership.
Our constitution is clear, blacks only.
A party who wants to participate in an election are not allowed to base its membership on race.
And what was this about?
Yeah.
Yo, it's been a lot, guys. With all this drama, how are we supposed to know who to vote for? In fact, are we even going to vote? Do we even know?
No.
So Lester, you've been following elections very closely, and we heard that you covered the final DA rally. How would you sum up this year's overall campaign in one word?
Dull.
And why?
Dull.
Dull.
I find this campaign absolutely dull. In fact, besides the theatrics around the TV adverts and stump speeches, there's been nothing that has attracted, I think, voters to why they should vote for a political party. If you were to go through the manifestations, it's quite a Freudian. If you want to look at the manifestos, let's say of the ANCDA and the EFF, they're somewhat similar. If you're going to look at, for example, something like special economic zones, basically zones in particular areas of the country with sort of relaxed taxation, relaxed labor laws. You have the ANC, sort of centrist party, you have the DA who's on the right, the EFF on the left, all agreeing on that. So it's the top three parties all sort of agreeing on the same policy.
So, as I mentioned before, it was recently World Press Freedom Day. As a journalist, how do you feel when you see this?
The habit of making people feel that you are the lord of the media. You are one journalist. You work for ENCA. You are the worst bully I've ever come across. I've never met anyone as arrogantly disposed as you are. And you want to defend freedom of speech you never fought for.
You're just a journalist, like I am just a citizen.
I think that journalists, you have to sort of take that on the chin, and at the same time, don't let physical threats of violence also get you, but also stand up to it. But if it's someone like Jesse or it's someone like Julius, everyone has a stake in this election and politics in South Africa. I tend to take it on the chin.
And can you comment on this notion that young people don't want to be guilt-tripped into voting? How do you feel about that?
I was on the West Coast last week and I spoke to quite a lot of young people. I asked them, are you registered to vote? And they're like, no, I'm not. Okay, why didn't you register? I was busy that day. So while at the same time they're not engaged enough, to be asked about actually going to register, I think there is an awareness and maybe even a guilt in that, with them coming up with excuses of why they didn't go. No one's really going to say, I'm not that interested. It's there is an engagement that is there, and maybe it's peer pressure, maybe it's campaigns or fun campaigns that they've probably seen, particularly on social media, that now many of them actually just want to go vote because they can get that sticker or that little ink on their thumb as they can put on social media. But I'm really feeling that one part I want to say youth are quite engaged. I think we are quite a politically aware
See what you did there?
Society, but I think we fall with political opinions more than actual political action. So we like to talk about politics, but we don't think we really want to get involved in politics.
Interesting. So, let me bring you in here, Zaid.
Yes.
I know that you've had your eye on youth voter numbers.
Yeah.
Please explain to us what's the story.
It's very, very interesting, actually. Back in March, the IEC released a media statement saying there's been a steady growth in voting registration, a whole 1.3 million increase since our last elections in 2014, and that at nearly 27 million, it is the highest number of registered voters to date. And this is the story South Africans heard.
Of the nearly 2.5 turning up at stations around the country, more than 700,000 were new registrations. 81% of those are the under 30s.
There seems to be a steady flow of young people that we are observing in the voting stations.
But what the IEC forgot to mention was that voter registration of 18 to 19-year-olds was down, a whopping 47%. Voter registration is also down in the 20 to 29 age group. And if you think about it, how fast our youth population is growing, this is not a good news story at all. And the IEC's window dressing didn't go down well with Parliamentary Monitoring Group, who said, "It's a concern as this prevents Parliament from performing effective oversight." The IEC clearly knew there was a problem because they launched a youth registration campaign.
Say, are you registering to vote in the 2019 national and provincial elections?
It's easy peasy.
Looks like the IEC's attempt to speak to young people in, I quote, their everyday parlance wasn't as easy peasy as they thought. Exe, what a fail. Well, we went to UCT to find out how students are feeling about the elections.
To be honest, I don't know how to feel about these elections.
Uncertain, not hopeful.
I can say that I'm very confused at this point in time. Just like, I don't know if I want to vote, I don't know.
It's become about these extra things. This guy isn't doing this. Look at what this guy did. I'm like, but you're not perfect either.
Politicians lie a lot because they give us free Wi-Fi now and then afterwards they take it away. So quite optimistic, I think.
I feel like it's going to be very interesting to see what's going to happen, like the outcome.
Because it's my first one, so I'm kind of excited to be engaged in the conversation.
Well, I'm actually excited to vote because we just turned 19.
So there's some excitement out there, but we're beginning to realize young people are engaging in other ways on issues that affect them. Political analyst Ibrahim Fakir was recently quoted as saying, "There's a global trend of young people participating less in formal political processes, but more in types of direct action, like protests and social media." Just think of how Fees Must Fall shook South Africa to its core and created real change.
We announced a plan for fee-free higher education for students from poor and working class backgrounds.
So Lester, what do you make of this drop in youth participation?
I think essentially, I think young people don't see people who look and sound like them, particularly in the theatre of the National Assembly and Parliament, and people who are driving policy and are actually being in the news. Yes, some political parties like the EFF, they have engaged quite a lot of young MPs to be part of the caucus. The DA does that also very well, bringing particularly young people up into the parliamentary theatre, taking to the podium. But I think the people where it really counts, the majority party, the people who they see in government, like the ANC, I just don't think that they see enough people like that in positions of power to actually get them motivated, not only just to participate in party politics, but in also just going out there and voting and being politically active in society.
Yeah. So we have a friend, Kateko Mabasa, at the Daily Maverick, who wrote a piece with the title, "I refuse to vote, but I still have a right to complain. Is refusing to vote or spoiling your ballot going to make a difference?"
I think it is a profoundly deep political statement to refuse to vote or to spoil your ballot, but you can't quantify that. Even I have thought going in there with a thick cokie and saying, "Take all of you." But the thing is, the IEC doesn't release the number of spoiled ballots, so it may be a personal political statement, but it's not really going to count. While at the same time, I believe that as a citizen of the country, whether you vote or not, whether you're of the highest earner or the lowest earner, everyone has the right to complain.
And so, can you comment on this idea that South Africans are politically engaged, just maybe not at the ballot box? For instance, with #FeesMustFall. That was a form of political engagement, but it was not necessarily saying, "Zach," in your words.
I think it was Fees Must Fall, starting off with the Roads Must Fall movement that preceded Fees Must Fall. It was so encouraging, standing on the UCT sports field and sort of looking around and saying, "You know what, the kids are all right, you know?" And then going on and following Fees Must Fall was deeply encouraging, seeing this activism and so much effort, like literally putting bodies and lives on the line. It was deeply powerful. But besides that was a big issue. But are you going to see people doing the same for example, SASSA grants, carbon tax levy? I think that we are very selective of what we feel passionately about. And if you look at social media, and I said before, we have plenty of political opinions, but I don't think we are politically involved enough.
So, For those who are voting on the 8th of May, let's have a look at what you're actually voting for. Zaid?
Yes, so you need to realize that when you go make your mark, you're voting for that party's manifesto, supposedly. It's kind of like those cell phone contracts you sign but don't read. You could skip those T's and C's, but remember you'll be waiting 5 years for that upgrade. That's 60 months, guys. Basically, it's important to know what you're getting yourself into. So what do people think should be in the manifestos? What are the 3 biggest issues that we need to fix in South Africa?
Inequality.
Equality. Economic inequality. Number 1 definitely I think is corruption.
Corruption. The government has not done its best to regulate within themselves.
Personally, I think that education.
Education.
It's impossible to escape poverty if you don't have education.
Unemployment.
Economic marginalization.
Power outages.
ESCOM. Things like housing.
I do think land will become more and more of an issue.
Let's just get everything somewhat functioning. Look, we can't expect miracles, but like, if we can get everything functioning somewhat, I'll be fine.
Wow, there's a lot of stuff to fix out there. How are the big 3 planning to do it? Let's have a look. So first up, education. All the parties agree that things need to change fast. After Zuma kicked it off with a bang, the ANC is sticking with free higher education for students from poor and working class backgrounds. By 2024, they want all undergraduate students to be fully funded by NSFAS. The EFF has also promised free compulsory higher education. And yes, you heard me right, compulsory. But not only that, they want to cancel all student debt, provide free accommodation, 2 free meals a day, free public transport, and free laptops. EFF, everything for free. The DA, on the other hand, are being party poopers on free education. They've proposed a voluntary national civilian service year for every matriculant who doesn't qualify for tertiary education. They would receive a stipend and work experience. No free laptops, not even a tablet. Next up, jobs. Mzansi is facing a major jobs crisis. As we saw in a previous episode, we have the highest youth unemployment in the world. The ANC's manifesto admits that employment growth has slowed since 2013. So what's their solution? Creating 275,000 jobs a year through the Presidential Jobs Summit Framework Agreement? Quite a mouthful. Last election, it was 6 million work opportunities. And they did in fact create 4.3 million. Probably most of them at ESCOM. The DA is a big believer in letting businesses solve all our problems. On page 11, they're offering special incentives for investors to make sure there's a job in every home. Kind of reminds me of one of those I make $5,000 a day from home ads. Meanwhile, the AFF guarantee 1 degree, 1 job, which when you match it up to their compulsory education promise means finding a hell of a lot of jobs from somewhere. And if it all goes to plan, expect 6% economic growth in the first 2 years and a whopping 10% in the remaining 3 years of EFF rule. I'm not sure how they're going to pull this off when our current growth is not even at 1%. But anyway. Lastly, we need to talk about the land. This is the EFF's home ground, territory, turf. They really want to put it on the map, and it's landed up on the political agenda, front and center ever since. They want to bring all land under custodianship of the state for equal redistribution to all. This means foreign land ownership would be a thing of the past, and a minimum of 50% would be redistributed to women and youth. The ANC also admitted that the land question has not been fully addressed. They've had 25 years already. But they seem to have finally kicked into gear as they weren't too happy with the EFF grabbing the land issue. So the plan is to submit the revised expropriation bill to the parliament to provide explicit circumstances under which land expropriation would happen without compensation. Cyril's got a tough job. On the one hand, he has to appease investors who are worried about a Zimbabwean scenario, and on the other, citizens who are calling for land reform. The DA's manifesto talks about land reform, but it still feels like it's business as usual. It promises guaranteed private property rights for everyone in the country and the rejection of expropriation without compensation. But there's one big issue no one's talking about: climate change. Even at UCT, in a city that came super close to running out of water, last year, thanks to the worst drought in 100 years, not a single student mentioned it as one of their top 3 issues. We've had crazy floods in KZN, massive cyclones in Mozambique, all made more intense by climate change. But according to an analysis of more than 10 manifestos, our political parties have critically failed to prioritize climate action. We went to a pre-election climate change town hall where political parties presented their plans on climate action. Let's hear what people thought.
The political parties that were here tonight, there's nothing that I can hold that they have said.
Climate change is insufficiently on the agenda for South African political parties. Young people get it.
I don't actually think they're going to implement many of the things that they said they were going to do today.
I think EFF going to be good in environment because EFF, when they speak, they do it.
COPE, it was legally, just legally better.
The political parties of COPE and the Dagga party were a little bit better than the others.
If the political party manifestos doesn't address the issues of climate change, we need to tell them.
Climate change will affect us youth more than anyone. If we are going to vote, we'd want to vote for a party that has our best interest at heart. So, Lester, the EFF has positioned itself as the youth party. Do you agree?
When you go around the country looking at who political parties are speaking to, the EFF is speaking to a key constituency. It is essentially black, it is essentially unemployed and sort of urban, peri-urban youth. So I don't think if they want to become a government, they obviously need to broaden the people who they're speaking to. Last election, they got 6%. People are saying that they could double that by getting about 12% this year. They are targeting the constituency. They don't need to go to the auntie in Roseback and try to convince her. They need to convince...
Auntie Pat?
They need to convince the unemployed or underemployed youth of this country. And I think they are doing that.
So we also have Smolanyana parties. So what do you make of minority parties this year? Are they a wasted vote or an alternative vote?
I think that minority voices are essentially part of the democratic project. I don't believe that any votes are wasted. I know there are some political parties, particularly the larger ones, saying that votes for smaller parties are essentially wasted. I don't believe that. If we're looking at the system that we're engaging in, a proportional representative system, where every single vote counts, that goes into a calculation and a formula that then determines who gets a seat in Parliament. And then when we're looking at representation in Parliament, we're seeing small political parties punching way above their weight. The first private members bill was a bill that was put forward by Sherilyn Dudley of the ACDP. That bill led to fathers get paid paternity leave. What were the big parties doing then? Nothing, when you had a party like the ACDP of only 3 members pushing a bill through. So I think that this notion that smaller parties are a waste of your vote, I think that's rubbish.
Oh, wow. So you heard Karima Brown referring to us as the youngsters. You know, we like to play games. We like to keep it fresh. So I'm going to show you faces, and I need you to react to these faces with a word.
You know this could get me into trouble.
No. So, first face.
I think leader.
Okay.
Auntie. This is all like Jungian analysis when Freud comes in. Okay. All right. There's so many internal filters. He was once playful with me. I'll call him playful, yes.
Okay. Okay. We'll take that.
Yeah. The thing is, I think Fridge, because after he was giving money, we started calling him Ace-Cus.
Okay. Ace-Cus. You'll know who this is.
Solidarity, brother. I feel quite sad for the Dagga party. Not necessarily saying that I had an intention to vote for them, but I think they were on a single issue political platform, which I think was absolutely great for them. I think single issue parties are important. We're looking at last election, the AIC. African Independent Congress, small party based in Matatiele in the Eastern Cape. People were confused because they have the same colours as the ANC. They were right below the ANC on the ballot paper. So the argument is that they actually got into parliament by mistake. But when they were on the parliamentary stage, they only focused on issues of Matatiele, and that was, I think, great, particularly for the people who voted for them back home.
And Dagga is now legal, so I'm just saying.
I'm not sure.
Okay, last face.
Eish. I know Kanthan. He's incredibly clever. He gave me my first internship actually when he was still head of news at ETV.
Wow.
So he's incredibly clever man, but he is a professional contrarian. Ooh. And I think if you say the sky is blue today, no, that is turquoise.
Oh, okay. So Zaid,
yes,
you and I know how the electoral system works because, we studied it. But I don't think that it's common knowledge for an average South African, right?
Yes, and it's sad that it isn't common knowledge because as everyone is afforded the opportunity to vote, should they choose to do so, the system in which that happens needs to be more well known. But we spoke to some students at UCT, we've done some research, and we can help explain it.
Do you know what type of electoral system South Africa has?
I don't know what that is. Directorate.
The IEC?
IEC. The IEC.
Parliamentary?
Democratic, I'm guessing. I don't know.
Oh, democratic, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Where the amount of votes is the amount of seats you get in parliament. That's the thing, right? Yeah, okay.
Ching, ching. We're like media students and initially we're going to be had for not knowing this. I swear.
So you're wondering how South Africa's electoral system works? Here's a handy crib sheet. We'll make this easy peasy. South Africa's parliament consists of two houses, the National Assembly with 400 seats and the National Council of Provinces with 90 seats. This is where all the big decisions get made about the laws governing our country, so it's a really dignified space where the smartest minds in our country come together.
Honorable Minister, next time you must bring breathalyzers here, man. No, man. How can a normal sober person say that? Honorable Malem.
South Africa has a proportional representation electoral system. On election day, we vote for parties, not individuals. So don't be fooled by Cyril's smiling face. The ANC could replace him with their ACE card. You might have seen the ANC and EFF party lists trending on Twitter. Each party chooses the people it wants to represent it in parliament and sends their lists to the Independent Electoral Commission, which oversees our election. It's a closed list, so voters can see who they've chosen, but voters don't get to make any changes. The ranking of the candidates on the list determines the likelihood of them getting a seat in parliament. It's kind of like when you Google something. When last did you check page 200 of the search results? And we checked out the DA's list, and even they don't seem too sure about their candidate. We spotted a question mark next to Elsibi Oosthuizen's name. Sorry, Elsibi. Hashtag justice for Elsibi. So how do parties actually get seats in the House? Okay, not like this. Basically, the number of votes a party received is translated into a proportion of the seats in the National Assembly. First regionally, then nationally. So roughly, if a party gets 10% of the votes cast, they'll end up with 10% of the 400 seats in the House. So what's good and bad about the system? Our system is more representative and gives smaller parties a chance. Sometimes all it takes is 1 or 2 votes for that crucial new law to pass, so smaller parties can have a big impact. But in other systems, like in the US, the country is split up into constituencies, and the candidate that wins the most votes in each constituency gets a seat. That's how Trump won the election, even though Hillary got more votes than him. The bad thing about our system is that the closed list can lead to less accountability, as candidates aren't directly chosen by voters.
What could possibly go wrong?
We are very lucky to have with us 2 ambassadors for Prof. Thuli Madonsela's M-Plan for Social Justice, Themba Siyisi and Hlonelwe Luthuli. It's good to see you again, guys.
Good to be here.
So, let's see what Prof. Thuli told us about the power of the youth vote. What are your thoughts about our upcoming elections? How do we encourage young people to say, yes, it's important to vote? Is it important? What are your thoughts?
Democracy is what we make of it. Properly understood is about power to the people, demos, people, kratos is power. This is a Greek word. My advice to young people is use, for example, days like Human Rights Day to ask political parties to come to your terrain. And you determine what future do you want for yourselves, and you ask the political parties which of you is going to make sure that it takes this agenda for change and implements it. Instead of the political parties setting the agenda, let young people set the agenda. And they can, because everyone wants your vote.
Wow. I hope Politically Aweh fans are listening, because I think you're dropping so much wisdom right now. We were chatting to Lester earlier about other ways young people engage with politics in South Africa, aside from the ballot box. That being said, I know you two are working on a very interesting campaign called Dear Presidents. Can you please tell us what is that about?
Dear Presidents is a campaign to inspire young people to participate in democracy. So we're getting young people to write letters to the different political parties, asking to reconcile social justice and the election manifestos. So this is what you say in your manifesto, but these are the challenges that I'm faced with as a young person. We're getting young people to demand accountability and to demand the political parties to work with them to make democracy work. So that's what we're doing, getting young people to write letters.
What's very special about the project is that we're getting opinions and we're getting the views of young people in their communities. It's no longer a matter of the broad situation in South Africa. It's a young person from this ward telling you about what's happening in their district, telling you about what they're seeing, and asking their leaders. And some of them have been very specific about the specific leader that they're talking to and telling them, here's what's wrong and I want you to fix it.
And what has the response been like? Are people writing these letters?
Not really, but we know young people.
Okay, I mean, surely one must have written a letter.
Yes, we've got about 20, 30 letters, but we're working on a strategy to meet young people halfway. Young people love social media, so we're going to go into the 377 municipalities with our cameras and say, let's talk.
Yeah.
And then we will transcribe that into a letter, which we will present to the political leader.
Okay, so I assume you've seen these letters. On average,
Yes.
what are they saying? What are people writing in these letters?
Unemployment.
Okay.
People are talking about unemployment, people are talking about violence in their communities, people are talking about corruption, that's come up a lot as well, and of course, land. Land has come up as well.
So we've really seen in this episode that the youth have become disengaged from the election process. So Lester, do you think this could be related to our electoral system?
People do get a bit jaded, feeling that they're not engaged, they're not participating actively in this process, especially if we're talking about a list process where people may not be happy with who appears on that list. But my answer to that is, if you are then unhappy with a particular people on a political list, don't just get involved in national politics, get involved in party politics if that is your thing. Join a political party so that you can have engagement, so you can add your voice.
I do agree with you, Lester, but also it feels as if our voices aren't being heard. It feels as if people get into parliament and then we have to wait 5 years before we can tell them how we feel. I would hope that there would be some sort of mechanism that would allow for an element of direct democracy in terms of holding specific leaders accountable within political parties, instead of having to wait for political parties to do it themselves, because as we can see, they're taking their own time in doing that. And that's also leading to a lack of credibility that we're finding as the youth and as new voters, because this is going to be my first time voting.
So how do we stay engaged after democracy? Is write the letter to the president.
So Lester, any final thoughts? Do you think we need the Daga Party to help us get through these elections?
All I'm saying, that first joint sitting would have been lit. The Daga Party can now bring some rolling max action. Look, I'm really excited for the 10th.
What are your estimations?
Here's my... I'm going to go for the ANC 56.
Okay. Sure.
I'm going to go for the DA 20. I'm going to go for. I'm quite buoyant about the EFF. I think they're going to double from 6 and probably land somewhere between 11 and 13, and the rest will be sort of distributed.
No good even.
No, I give within 1 seat in the national.
Okay, wow. Thank you, Lester. Thank you to all our guests, Lester, Hlonelwa, Themba. It's been great chatting to you guys. Please welcome writer and comedian Tyson Ngubeni.
It's 7:45 in Wisconsin right now. You can take my word for it. I'm Bob O'Connor. I'm a special envoy for a media entity which shall not be named. A couple of months ago, I was deployed to South Africa to get a pulse of the election seasons just before people take to the polls. This is what I found. These are a couple of excerpts from across the nation.
I'm Cheryl from Randburg, and I think it's really important for people to be going out and actually going out to vote, make your voice heard. I think it's important, whatever issues you may want to raise, you have to raise them. I think, those iconic words which were said in the 60s, elections are like one small step for man, one giant leap for Mendoza. And that's why we play Inkalabota rugby and cricket games.
We also managed to tackle some pretty important issues for the people. South Africa is, of course, plagued with inequality and unemployment. But when you put some people in front of a camera, they raise issues you may not have considered. My singular intention is to dismantle yellow-bone privilege. I think yellow-bones have come to occupy a central position in the economic, social, and cultural spheres. I think, when people are equal economically, socially, complexionally, this is when our country begins to move forward. Yellow-bones, they have, certain advantages, which we also want. I think it's only fair. I mean, we all have dreams. Someday I want to be able to take photos at night without the flash. Someday I want to be able to, walk down the street and, people point to me and say, Nivea for men. I don't know. Of course, we've seen all sorts of declarations about land policy and business policies which are supposed to be elevated. We caught up with Mamusi Maymane at a rally in the township, and this was pretty much what he was saying.
The economy has to be addressed in such a way that investment is prioritized.
But when we caught up with him at a business breakfast in Sandton, things were a little bit different.
And when we address the economy, certain investment priorities will be privileged.
Well, it's 6:47 in Wisconsin and Wyoming. I've been Bob O'Connor. Good night.
Thanks for joining us for the special elections episode of Politically Aweh. If you liked this episode and can't wait to see more, please subscribe to our channel and join in the conversation using the hashtag #GetAway. Now go out and vote, Mzansi. Or don't. But whatever you do, stay woke, stay away.